In a vast, tiered hall, a confrontation reaches its breaking point. A young boy with light hair, his face cast in shadow, radiates a menacing energy. He decides that if this is how his opponent wants to play, then he will not hold back either. His declaration is followed by an immense eruption of power as he summons a colossal, multi-headed flame dragon. The other students watch in horror. One, with long hair, identifies the summoner in disbelief as the white demon, Lael, realizing he is a demon. This event marks the beginning of the story of how a boy became a great mage and rebuilt his fallen family's name. The memory fades, giving way to a peaceful scene. The sun shines brightly over a vast, mountainous landscape covered in lush forests. Within this wilderness, a magnificent creature emerges from the trees, a great horned deer. Years later, the boy once known as Lael, now a 15-year-old named Leon, is out with an older man. The man suggests it's time for Leon to try hunting. Leon thoughtfully considers the best method to take down the deer from a distance without ruining the meat, concluding that a precise wind arrow would be superior to lightning. He puts his theory into practice, forming a sign with his hands. He focuses intently, channeling his magic to be small, concentrated, and fast. The display of control catches the older man by surprise, his eyes widening slightly at the boy's refined technique. His astonishment is justified as a silent projectile streaks through the air, striking the great horned deer squarely in the head. The creature collapses instantly. Approaching the fallen creature, the man inspects the result. He points to the single, clean wound, amazed. He exclaims that for a first real hunt, to show so much power and land a perfect one-shot kill is truly amazing. The boy beams at the praise, explaining with a shy smile that he practiced by himself and that it makes him happy when his dad praises him. The proud father asks when he learns such a skill, affectionately ruffling his son's hair. He agrees with his father's assessment. As the sun sets over the rugged mountains, his father decides they should head home, planning to butcher enough of their kill for themselves and sell the rest in town the next day. He and his father arrive at their cozy home nestled against the woods. Leon calls out that he's home, and a woman with dark hair and a warm smile greets them from the doorway, announcing that dinner is perfectly timed and just about ready. His mother praises him for being a hard worker and tells him to take a break. Eager to help, Leon asks if he can bring the food over to the table. As he carries a plate, a small, dark-haired boy rushes toward him with uncontained excitement. The child, Marcus, throws his arms out wide and shouts a cheerful welcome home to his big brother. The boy is bursting with energy, telling Leon to listen to what happened today. He urges his brother to wash his hands for dinner so he can tell him all about it while they eat. His mother smiles, remarking on what a loving kid Marcus is. She gently warns her younger son to be careful not to trip while running, and Leon agrees with a smile. The family gathers around the dinner table. Together, they put their hands together and give thanks for the meal before them. He takes a spoonful of soup, his expression immediately brightening. He tells his mother he loves the soup and that it's delicious. She explains that because it's Leon Hartfilia's birthday, she made his favorite. His father, Dominic, proudly adds that Leon hunted a great horned deer for the first time that day. His mother, Rin, reacts with amazement, suggesting they can cook something special with the meat the next day. His younger brother, Marcus, eagerly cuts in fork in hand. He insists on finishing the story he was trying to tell earlier. He burst with excitement, throwing his arms in the air. He shouted for everyone to guess what happened, proudly announcing that he had successfully used the soap bubble spell for the very first time, making a whooshing sound to describe it. His older brother looked on, a smile on his face. Leon remarked that it was amazing, realizing that if Marcus could use magic too, then it meant something significant for their family. Their father, Dominic, beamed with pride, declaring that this meant everyone in their family had magical aptitude and that Marcus had a bright future. Their mother, Rin, agreed it was wonderful, but gently warned her youngest son to be careful not to overuse his power to avoid mana sickness. Later that evening, after the excitement led Marcus to fall asleep, the mood grew more serious. Rin noted that it was his first time using magic, just as it was Leon's 15th birthday. Dominic then turned to Leon, stating that they needed to decide what came next and asking if he had made a decision about his future. He stood with his back to them, his hand clenching into a fist at his side. With a heavy breath, he affirmed that he had, addressing his father and mother with resolve. He turned, his gaze unwavering, and announced his intention to enroll in the Magic Academy. His parents reacted with visible shock. His father questioned if this was something he absolutely had to do, and Leon confirmed that it was. His father stepped closer, explaining that for families like theirs, who were former nobles, the treatment they would face was even harsher than that of commoners. He added that Leon's distinctive silver hair and blue eyes would only make him stand out more. He pulled his son into a gentle embrace, his voice filled with concern. Dominic clarified that it wasn't about denying his dream. He and Rin were simply worried. He looked at Leon earnestly, asking if there was some reason he couldn't choose a different path. The memory of a different time surfaced. 5 years ago, a stone edifice stood under a gray sky, a silent witness to a past event. In that past, Dominic and a much younger Leon were heading home from the market when their path was blocked. A large, ostentatiously dressed man greeted Dominic with mock deference as Lord Hartfilia, then sneered as he corrected himself, reminding Dominic that he no longer held that name. He greeted Dominic with a sneer, remarking that it had been a while, and addressing him as Lord Abard. His gaze then fell upon the two kneeling children, Leon and his brother, noting their miserable expressions before asking Leon for his age. Looking up, the young boy replied that he would be 10 that year. His eyes remained fixed on the imposing figures of Lord Nabard and his aide as they loomed over him. Lord Nabard suddenly pointed at Leon, declaring his hair and eye color disgusting. He spat the words demon child, causing Dominic's expression to harden with fury. Enraged, Dominic lunged forward, shouting at Nabard and demanding to know what was wrong with his defiant look. His charge was brutally intercepted by one of Nabard's men, who struck him down. The blow sent Dominic sprawling onto the dusty ground as Leon cried out for his father. As his father lay defeated, the aide smirked at Leon, remarking on his terrible luck for being taken in by the traitor Hartfilia family. Lord Nabard, turning his back, declared it was enough and ordered his carriage brought out. He clenched his small fist, the memory of that day still burning. The frustration of being unable to retaliate was immense, but the word that haunted him most was traitor. Driven by this, he began searching through every book in the house, determined to understand what the Hartfilia family had done to the Neberts. His search led him to his grandfather's journal. The journal detailed the family's downfall. It revealed they were swindled out of a large sum by several nobles, led by Nabard. Unable to pay their taxes, they were stripped of their title under the false claim of betraying the kingdom. Nabard, however, was cunning and left no evidence of his scheme. In that moment, Leon's path became clear. He resolved to repay the Hartfilia family, the people who took him in and raised him as their own. He would enter the Magic Academy, graduate at the top of his class, become a great mage, and earn a noble title. With that, he knew he could restore the family's honorable name. His father, Dominic, placed a firm hand on his shoulder, his expression softening. He apologized for the trouble Leon had endured, noting the seriousness in his eyes. He gave his full support, telling Leon to do his best at the academy. Hearing this, Leon's face lit up with a brilliant, heartfelt smile. He looked up at his parents and promised with all his conviction that he would do his very best. Dominic's supportive demeanor quickly turned celebratory. Holding up a bottle, he declared that since Leon was now an adult, it was time for a drink. His wife, Rin, teased him, knowingly pointing out that he was just looking for an excuse to celebrate. The family gathered, and Dominic poured a glass of wine for a slightly startled Leon. Together, the three of them raised their glasses in a toast to the future. Sometime later, Dominic was slumped over the dinner table, groaning from the effects of the alcohol. As Rin served him a plate of food, she sighed, remarking to Leon that his father had started up again. Suddenly, he shot up and lunged at Leon, wrapping him in a crushing, tearful hug. He began to wail, crying out that he would miss Leon terribly and begging him not to leave. It became apparent that Dominic was a weepy drunk. He held his sobbing father, tears welling in his own eyes. He tried to soothe him, gently chiding him for being so dramatic and reminding him that this wasn't a final goodbye. As Dominic held him, Rin placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. They both assured him that if things ever became too difficult, he could always come back. They would be waiting for him at home. Overwhelmed by their love, Leon began to cry, unsure if it was from the wine or the pure emotion of the moment. The morning of his departure arrived. Dressed smartly in his new academy uniform, Leon adjusted his collar and announced he was off. His parents waved warmly from the doorway, wishing him well and telling him to stay safe. Nearby, his little brother Marcus watched shyly, whispering a quiet farewell. As he prepared to leave, his younger brother Marcus lunged forward, clinging to him desperately and crying out his name. The boy looked up, tears streaming down his face as he created shimmering soap bubbles that floated around them. He pleaded with his big brother not to forget them and urged him to do his best. With his brother's tearful farewell concluded, Leon settled into the carriage for the long journey ahead. He contemplated the 2 or 3 days it would take to reach the royal capital and considered practicing some magic, but quickly dismissed fire and ice as too dangerous for the confined space. Instead, he focused his energy, deftly manipulating water into the shape of 2 shimmering, fish-like creatures that swam through the air before him. His thoughts drifted back to his family. He reaffirmed his promise to his beloved mom and dad, and especially to Marcus. He vowed to become a great mage and repay them all by restoring the honor of the Hartfilia family. Sometime later, a soft meow broke the silence. A sleek black cat with a bell on its collar appeared before him, its voice echoing strangely as it addressed him as young master. He awoke with a start, realizing he had fallen into a deep sleep. He apologized to the driver, who stood at the open carriage door, but the man simply expressed his gladness that the ride was comfortable before announcing their arrival at the royal capital. Stepping out of the carriage, Leon accepted a map to the academy's entrance ceremony from the driver. The man wished him well, and Leon expressed his sincere gratitude. He turned his attention to the city before him, his eyes widening in amazement. The royal capital was a vast, bustling metropolis, teeming with people and life. He made his way through a lively market square, passing a grand fountain, when a friendly voice called out to him. The voice belonged to a cheerful street vendor, who correctly identified him as a new student at the Magic Academy. The man offered a free sample, boasting that his skewers were delicious. He was taken aback for a moment, but the offer was too tempting. Deciding that a single sample couldn't hurt, he happily accepted. The taste was so good that he immediately asked to purchase a full skewer. The vendor grinned, thanking him for his business as he handed it over. He continued on his way, enjoying the snack and noting the sheer number of stalls lining the street. His attention was then caught by a magic tool shop, and he made a mental note to stop by later. He refocused on his journey, recalling the directions from his map. He believed that if he simply continued straight down this street, he would reach his destination shortly. However, after walking for some time without success, he paused to consult the map again. His brow furrowed in confusion. The map clearly indicated this was the main street, yet his destination was nowhere in sight. Looking up from the parchment, his eyes fell upon a familiar sight, the very same magic tool shop he had passed earlier. He froze, a sudden realization dawning. He looked around, a growing sense of unease washing over him. Something was fundamentally wrong. He was trapped in a loop. He observed the others wandering aimlessly on the cobblestone path, a thought crystallizing in his mind. Could all these lost people be new students, just like him? Nearby, a girl with a long braid voiced her concern to a dark-haired companion, asking if he also felt something was amiss. He confirmed her suspicion, agreeing that he'd had the same thought. The group's shared unease was broken by a loud exclamation from a spiky-haired young man. He found it strange, he declared, that no matter how straight he walked, he always ended up back in the same spot. His words caught Leon's attention, sparking a flicker of understanding. His gaze dropped to the document in his hands. It detailed a route to a venue, bearing a strict and clear directive. Arrival before sunset was mandatory. Connecting the magical looping street with the document's promise of a world of magic and its strict time limit, the truth struck him. This wasn't an accident. This entire ordeal was a test. It was the entrance exam itself. Standing in what appears to be a town square, Leon clutches a document and assesses his predicament. He concludes that his first priority is to understand his current situation, as he is unable to reach the Magic Academy for his first trial. He observes the people around him moving in a repeating pattern and realizes that if the same scenery keeps looping, he is likely trapped by some form of magic. Still, he finds it difficult to believe that a spell would be used that affects all the townspeople as well, as they seem completely oblivious. His eyes widen as he notices the people he was just watching have suddenly vanished in a thin air, confirming his suspicion. With a gasp of understanding, he identifies the grand illusion for what it is and invokes a counterspell, uttering the single word, dispel. The world around him fractures, the false reality shattering like glass as the spell takes effect. As the illusion dissolves, the true location is revealed, the magnificent, towering edifice of the Magic Academy. Leon throws a triumphant fist in the air, shouting his success. He stands before the Academy's open gates, relieved to have made it in time. A voice suddenly congratulates him by his full name, Leon Hartfilia, for passing the entrance exam, causing him to look up in surprise. The speaker, a large man with a scar over his eye, introduces himself as Grant, Leon's new homeroom teacher. Grant gestures to another young man with a shaved head, explaining that he is the other student who cleared the exam at nearly the same moment. As Grant speaks, Leon recognizes another successful candidate celebrating boisterously nearby, the spiky-haired student he had passed earlier. The student throws his arms up in the air, shouting his victory as others applaud. He cheerfully introduces himself as Mark, noting that he and the other student cleared the exam at the same time. Extending a hand, he says he's looking forward to studying together. The other student introduces himself as Leon and accepts the handshake, agreeing with a firm grip. As they begin walking through the academy grounds, Mark tells Leon that he has arranged for a second-year student to be their guide and that they should follow them. Leon, carrying a briefcase, asks what he means. Leaning in close, Mark whispers to him, asking about the trick behind the entrance exam. A short distance ahead, their upperclassman guide gestures welcomingly, offering to show them around. Leon reacts with wide-eyed surprise, questioning how Mark could have possibly passed the exam without even realizing how it worked. Mark quickly shushes him, hissing that their guide will overhear them. Lowering his voice, Leon explains the exam's design. It was a sophisticated combination of illusion and teleportation magic. The academy was hidden within the townscape, and any applicant who walked through the gate without first dispelling the illusion was simply teleported away as the scenery looped. Mark is stunned by the detailed explanation, exclaiming that he can't believe Leon figured it all out. Leon modestly replies that he just happened to find a clue. Their guide, having overheard, turns back with a look of surprise. Mark, however, grins confidently and puts his hands behind his head. He boasts that he simply had a hunch he was under a spell, so he tried using dispel and got lucky. Their guide claps his hands together, amazed. He praises Leon, noting that very few students managed to figure out the exam's true nature. Leon, slightly flustered, realizes they were being overheard the whole time. The praise resonates with Leon. A hopeful smile spreads across his face as he thinks to himself that even a second-year student is impressed. He feels that this is a good start to the academy life that is finally about to begin. With introductions made, the upperclassman leads them down a grand, portrait-lined hallway. He gestures forward, guiding the two new students deeper into the academy as they follow, ready for what lies ahead. He follows the guide, listening as the upperclassman explains the academy structure. Each grade is divided into 3 classes, Eins, Zwei, and Drei, based on entrance exam results. The guide cheerfully informs them that they both made it into the top class, Eins, adding that while Leon might feel he got it on luck, luck is a component of skill. Mark is thrilled by the news. The guide then adds a caveat, Class placement isn't the only measure of a student. The academy also values the ability to adapt to unexpected situations. With a gesture, he announces their arrival at the classroom for ice. Inside, the vast lecture hall is nearly empty and silent. Only 3 other students are present, seated far apart from one another in the tiered rows. One student, a young woman with dark hair, is sound asleep. Another, a dark-haired young man, lounges with his hands behind his head, a look of disdain on his face. The third, a young man with long, tied-back hair, watches the room with a calm, thoughtful expression. Taking in the scene, Leon notes the open seating arrangement and suggests to Mark that they find seats somewhere in the middle, an idea Mark readily accepts. As they make their way toward the center of the lecture hall, a small, winged creature peeks out from Mark's back. Their path is suddenly blocked by the arrogant student, who introduces himself as Darren Roas. He sneers, telling them that commoners should know their place and sit farther away from the nobles. Leon, taken aback, points out the open seating policy, but Darren dismisses his nerve. Before the argument can escalate, the long-haired student rises from his seat. He calmly tells Darren that's enough. Darren bristles at the interruption, but the student, whom he calls Heath, firmly states that the issue is between him and Leon. He continues, declaring that within the academy's walls, nobles and commoners are treated as equals. Being a noble, he asserts, is not a license for tyranny. To punctuate his point, he reveals his own identity. He is the second prince, a statement that leaves Darren speechless. Turning his attention from the stunned noble, Heathcliff Dewin formally introduces himself to Leon and Mark. He apologizes on Darren's behalf and expresses his hope that they can all get along. Mark whispers in astonishment, recognizing the royal name, while Leon admits he was on the verge of fighting back and tells the prince there is no need for an apology. He smiles warmly, wishing Leon and Mark a great time at the academy. Mark is relieved, remarking that it was a good thing the prince stepped in. He had expected arrogance, but found him to be a decent person. Leon, however, quietly disagrees with this assessment. Leon reflects on the encounter, realizing the prince's true motive. Heath wasn't helping them. He was protecting Darren. His outward smile was a facade. It wasn't that Heath looked down on them like Darren did. It was that they didn't even register to him at all. He concludes that the prince is a different, perhaps even worse, type of noble than the others he's met. A cold sweat forms as Leon hopes they can avoid attracting his attention in the future. Later, the instructor Grant addresses the entire incoming class. He congratulates the new students, announcing that every one of them successfully passed the entrance exam before sunset. Inside a large lecture hall, he demonstrates levitation magic, causing stacks of paper to float and distribute themselves to the desks. Both Leon and Mark are impressed, with Mark marveling that magic is truly a part of everyday life here. As the students examine the orientation materials, Grant begins the briefing. He raises a finger to emphasize his final point, declaring one extremely important rule. Private duels on academy grounds are strictly forbidden. After the orientation concludes, Leon informs Mark that they are to head to their dorms. Mark leans back, admitting he stopped listening halfway through the long speech. Leon then reveals the most important detail. They have been assigned to the same dormitory. They both react with excitement to the news. With renewed energy, they decide to head there immediately. As Mark eagerly leads the way, Leon's expression suddenly shifts from excitement to apprehension, and he comes to an abrupt halt. Before them stands a massive, dilapidated mansion covered in cobwebs and overgrown with vines. Staring at the decrepit building, Mark voices their shared disbelief, questioning what this rundown dorm could possibly be. As his companion watched, Leon cautiously pushed the creaking door open, his hand trembling slightly. He braced himself, muttering that the interior was probably just as much of a haunted house as the outside. The door swung wide to reveal not decay, but a breathtakingly grand and sparkling foyer. A massive chandelier glittered above a sweeping staircase, leaving both him and Mark utterly speechless. Mark could only stammer, What is this?" Before they could process the sight, another student with dark, dreadlocked hair clapped Mark on the shoulder, explaining with a grin that it was all just large-scale magic. Still reeling, Mark wondered aloud what was going on, while Leon looked on in awe. In that moment of confusion, a tall, bespectacled young man swept in, throwing his arms around both of them in a startlingly friendly gesture. "Welcome, new students," he boomed. He leaned in close, whispering conspiratorially that the whole surprising trick had been his idea. It was meant, he explained, as a little ironic lesson. Don't judge things by their appearance. Pulling back with a sharp-toothed grin, he acknowledged his own rudeness for not introducing himself first. He then formally presented himself as Quentin Walls, the prefect of the South Dorm. Quentin then gestured for them to proceed, instructing them to come down to the dining hall for the new student welcome party after they finished unpacking upstairs. He promised the kitchen was going all out for the occasion before departing. Alone again, Mark buzzed with excitement, eager to unpack quickly so they could get to the food at the party. Leon agreed, though he noted the large amount of unpacking they had to do first. Their task completed, they descended to a dining hall filled with an even more spectacular sight, a massive, glittering buffet table laden with an incredible variety of fancy dishes. Both boys stared, wide-eyed and amazed at the lavish spread. Raising their glasses in a silent toast, Mark declared that a man has to have meat. As he reached for a steak, Leon reminded him to balance it with some vegetables, reaching for a different platter himself. He continued his conversation with Mark, who asked if he knew any of the other new students. Leon explained that he didn't know a soul, as he was the only person from his town with any magical aptitude. As Mark turned the question back to him, Leon began to stammer a response, but was cut off by a condescending voice from behind. The newcomer sneered, recognizing him as a lowly heart filia. The young man, Ayrton Nabard, sauntered forward with a wine glass in hand, a smug look on his face. Leon recognized him immediately, surprised to see him enrolled at the academy. Ayrton's gaze was filled with contempt. His smug demeanor vanished as he tripped and fell to the floor, drawing gasps from nearby students. Scrambling to his feet, his face contorted with rage, he bellowed that he was to be addressed as Lord Ayrton. His fury escalating, he clasped his hands together, gathering a bright surge of magical energy. He roared that commoners like them should know their place. Sensing the imminent danger, Leon shot up from his seat, his eyes wide with alarm. As Ayrton unleashed a massive fireball, Leon reacted instantly, throwing his hands forward to conjure a shimmering hexagonal barrier. He shouted for the other students to get back, but before the fiery projectile could make contact, it simply vanished into thin air. Leon stared, bewildered, realizing the spell had been dispelled mid-flight. Across the room, Ayrton stood frozen in disbelief. From a balcony above, a sharp voice cut through the silence. Quentin Walls, the dorm prefect, addressed Ayrton directly. He declared that discriminatory remarks and personal fights were strictly forbidden on campus, warning the first year that while he would overlook the incident this time, he must be more careful from now on. He then addressed all the new students, announcing that classes would begin the next day, and it was time to conclude the party. As the students began to disperse, Mark turned to Leon with a laugh, remarking that he certainly knew some strange people. Leon could only agree as Mark suggested they head back to their room. Quentin Walls looked at Leon with a discerning eye, remarking that defensive magic is typically a second-year subject. He praised Leon's casting, noting its flawless speed, form, and power. When Quentin asked if he had taught himself that spell, Leon simply confirmed that he had. As they walked together, Quentin expressed his confidence that Leon would do well at the academy. Mark, walking alongside them, chimed in, mentioning he'd heard that the next day's class would be a fireball practice session. The prefect then bid them good night, waving over his shoulder as he walked away. He added that he was looking forward to seeing the results of the practice session. With the prefect gone, Mark remarked to Leon that he was already becoming quite popular. Noticing his friend's distant expression as he stared down the hall, Mark called out, asking if he was even listening. But Leon was consumed by his own thoughts, a fierce determination hardening his expression. He clenched his fist, realizing that his journey was finally beginning. He knew that to reach the top of the academy, this start was crucial, and with a silent vow, he resolved to give it his all from the very next day. As the day begins at the academy, the time has come for the new students to be tested. In a dormitory room, two young men prepare for the day ahead. Inside their shared room, the two roommates are occupied with their own interests. Mark sits cross-legged on his bed, polishing a large sword, while Leon sits engrossed in a book. The two present a study in contrasts. Leon, with a calm and focused expression as he reads, and Mark, a confident smirk on his face as he handles his blade. His attention turns to Mark's sword, and Leon comments that he's taken good care of it. From his bed, Mark confirms with a slight grin. He then explains his connection to the weapon, revealing that his father was a guardsman. A brief memory surfaces of his father guiding his small hands on a sword, instilling in him a love for swordsmanship from a young age, even though he is now enrolled in a magic academy. Leon expresses his admiration, noting that it's amazing to train both magic and the body. Mark agrees enthusiastically, flexing and declaring that having good stamina is always an advantage, especially in a fight. His curiosity piqued. Mark asks what Leon is reading. Leon explains it's a book called The Difference Between Magic and Marks. He mentions that he didn't know mark could also mean a magical seal, and finding it interesting, he bought the book on his way to the capital. He seems impressed by Leon's academic nature, declaring himself more of a physical type. Mark praises Leon's intelligence and offers to lend him the book, but Leon sheepishly admits he's not much of a reader. As their conversation winds down, night falls over the dormitory. One of them wishes the other a good night, and the lights are turned out. The following day, the students of Eins gather on the training grounds. Their instructor, Grant, announces that it is time to begin their magic practice, starting with target practice. He began the lesson, pointing to a distant practice dummy. The target, he explained, would be the mark set 25 meters ahead. As he spoke, a roiling sphere of flame materialized in his open palm. This, he declared, was a fireball, the spell they would be using for the assessment. The students listened intently. Mark clarified for the group that while hitting the target was of course important, their magic would also be assessed from various other angles, including its power and speed. He continued, giving a confident thumbs up. The target, he assured them, wouldn't break from just 1 or 2 hits, so they shouldn't hold back. Extending their effective range to 25 meters would make their attack magic far more versatile in different situations. The instructor then laid out the final rule. When a student's name was called, they were to step into the designated circle on the ground. Upon receiving the signal, they were to launch their fireball. With the rules established, Grant called out the first name, Mark. Startled, Mark realized with a jolt of anxiety that going first was seriously nerve-wracking. Still, He resolved that he had no choice but to go for it and strode forward. He took his position and with a sharp grunt, thrust his hand forward. A ball of dark flame erupted from his palm, speeding towards the distant target. The spell struck the outer ring of the target, leaving a scorch mark. Grant praised Mark for his speed, and Leon added his own encouragement. Mark, scratching the back of his head, thanked them, admitting he missed by a bit. Grant urged the class to keep things moving. He and Leon looked closer at the target, which was barely even scorched. Leon mused that the target was seriously tough, questioning if a standard fireball was even enough to be considered effective against it. Grant then called for the next participant, Heathcliff Dewin. Leon's eyes widened in recognition. It was the second prince. Heath calmly tied back his long hair and acknowledged the call with a simple yes. As he walked toward the circle, Quentin Walls watched with excitement, remarking that the prince was up next. Beside him, Leon watched thoughtfully, wondering if the royal's magical skills were as impressive as his reputation. He steps forward, his expression focused as he extends his hands. A complex, glowing glyph materializes in the air before him. From a glyph, a massive, crackling sphere of dark flame erupts, hurtling towards the distant targets. The sheer force of the spell sends a wave of heat across the training ground, causing the watching students to flinch and shield their faces. Despite the impressive spectacle, the target is only lightly scorched. As Grant calls for Leon Heartfilia to take his turn, Mark offers some encouragement, telling Leon not to stress too much and to just do his best. Leon quietly thanks him. He takes a slow, steadying breath, his expression calm and unreadable as he prepares for his turn. Then, with a simple gesture, he points a single finger forward. A small, swirling vortex of dark energy immediately forms at its tip, catching Grant's attention. The other students feel the shift in energy. They murmur amongst themselves, sensing an intense power emanating from the small spell and wondering if they are about to witness something incredible. But as he releases the spell, only a tiny speck of energy shoots forward with a faint pop. Quentin immediately erupts in laughter, pointing and declaring it a lame dud. Even Heath seems taken aback, observing that it wasn't a fireball at all. However, the tiny projectile was no dud. It was a fireball the size of a candy drop, launched faster and with more concentrated power than any spell before. It strikes the target dead on, hitting the exact center with perfect accuracy. While his display stunned most, for Quentin Walls, it was an unbearable humiliation. The thought echoed in his mind. A mere commoner was surpassing him. His simmering resentment boiled over. He clenched his fist, muttering a curse as he spat out the name that now tormented him. Leon Heartfilia? This disbelief was shared by others. Grant, the instructor, observed calmly as another student loudly protested the results. The student argued that Heartfilia had clearly failed and that the prince's magic was the most amazing, questioning if the instructor was confusing the two. Amid the uproar, Mark rushed to Leon's side, buzzing with excitement. He exclaimed that getting first place was awesome and, noting Leon's usually laid-back demeanor, demanded to know how he did it. Another student chimed in, also demanding an explanation. Later, sitting together outside, Leon began to explain his methodology to Mark. He shared that his focus was on making his attack magic more practical, revealing his belief that the effects of magic can change drastically depending on a user's imagination. Mark admitted he only understood about half of the complex theory, but was still impressed that it led to Leon being rated higher than the prince. He then asked where Leon had learned it all. Leon paused, a wry smile playing on his lips as he replied that he wasn't sure Mark would believe him. He began to explain, describing a recurring dream he has had every night since he was a small child. A dream where he wanders through a vast, mysterious mansion accompanied by a little black kitten. He elaborated that the mansion in his dream was filled with countless books on magic. Every night, he would study and test what he learned until he ran out of mana. Though he still doesn't know where this mansion is, he confessed to feeling a strange nostalgia for the kitten. He concluded by asking if it all sounded unbelievable. Without a moment's hesitation, Mark emphatically declared, "No way. I believe you." He thought gaining skills through a dream was seriously cool. Leon was visibly moved by his friend's unwavering trust. He admitted that he had never told anyone before and was genuinely glad that Mark believed him, a small, relieved smile gracing his features. As he and Mark stood together, their conversation was interrupted by another student. The newcomer, Darren Roas, remarked that he had been curious about Mark's sword before turning his full attention to Leon. He sneered, addressing Leon dismissively by his hair color and accusing him of getting too full of himself. With a beckoning gesture, Darren declared his intention to teach Leon his place. With a condescending smirk, he leaned in, tauntingly asking if Leon was scared. Leon met his gaze without a word, his expression unreadable. As Darren began to lead him away, Leon glanced back at his friend. He calmly told Mark to return to the classroom without him, assuring him that he would finish this quickly. The instruction left Mark stunned, stammering in protest as his friend walked toward the confrontation. Disoriented, Leon looks around the unfamiliar, dense foliage and asks his guide, Quentin Walls, where they are. Quentin leads him out of the woods to a grand, column structure. A sign above the large entrance clearly reads, "The Arena." Inside, the space opens into a vast, empty amphitheater. Quentin explains that this is the arena used for classes and, more importantly, for duels between mages. He points a commanding finger at Leon, instructing him to stand on the white line across the floor. He adds that if this is an official duel, it won't count as a private fight. As Quentin turns to take his own position, Leon looks on in shock. Quentin casually mentions that for an official duel, they will need a witness. Just then, a new voice cuts in. Heathcliff Dewin appears with a confident smile, apologizing to Heartfilia and offering to serve as the witness himself. Leon watches Quentin walk away, the pieces clicking into place. He realizes with a grim certainty that Heathcliff must have been behind this duel from the very start. Heathcliff addresses both students, confirming they are on their respective white lines. He then lays out the rules. They're to fire magic at each other, and the duel ends when one of them says, "I give up." His expression hardens as he prepares to officiate. He announces that as the witness, he will say begin to start the duel. But before the word can leave his lips, a torrent of dark energy erupts from Quentin. The force of the blast slams into Leon, sending him flying backward. He cries out, stunned by the blatant sneak attack. He staggers, his face bruised and his eyes wide with disbelief. Quentin stands over him, a shadowy, menacing figure, mocking him for not hearing the duel start. He dismisses the onlookers as pathetic fools. As Quentin stands triumphant, his thoughts drift to an earlier conversation with Leon. He had known there was class discrimination at the academy and was prepared for criticism. However, he found the royals and nobles to be even more arrogant and ridiculous than expected, people who get thrilled over sneak attacks. He clenches his fists, realizing it was stupid to have ever tried to be considerate to them. Before Quentin can press his advantage, an immense pressure erupts from Leon's position. The force is so intense that both Quentin and Heathcliff cry out, clutching their heads in agony as the very air seems to vibrate around them. Quentin, reeling from the unexpected assault, glares at Leon with pure fury. He snarls that he has some nerve, but his threat is cut short by what he sees next. The source of the pressure reveals itself. A colossal, multi-headed dragon formed of crackling, ethereal energy materializes around Leon. Quentin stares, utterly dumbfounded, unable to comprehend the spectacle, while Heathcliff is equally stunned by the sheer scale of the magic being unleashed. As the monstrous form looms, Heathcliff's mind races back to his own ambitions. As the second prince of the kingdom, he carried a firm sense of pride. He had entered the academy with top scores on the entrance exam and had fully expected to achieve the highest marks in the spellcasting trials as well. Yet, that expectation was shattered. A mere commoner, Leon Heartfilia, had surpassed him. For a member of the royal family, this was an unbearable, humiliating truth. The memory sharpens the present reality. Heathcliff stares at the overwhelming power radiating from Leon, the draconic forms swirling around him. He is forced to confront the truth he had tried to deny. The gap in their abilities was far greater than he had ever imagined. His realization is echoed by Quentin's raw terror. Scrambling backward on the floor, Quentin points a trembling finger at the spectacle, his composure completely shattered. He screams that Leon is a demon as his own robe becomes soaked, a testament to his fear. The demonic energy surges, filling the arena with a blinding, chaotic maelstrom of power. In the aftermath of the overwhelming display of power, Quentin Walls, with a hand pressed to his chest, declares that the confrontation was not a private fight, but an official duel conducted in the name of Heathcliff Dewin. Despite his declaration, no one had suffered any injuries. Leon knew the flame dragon he had unleashed was merely an oversized intimidation spell, lacking the power to truly harm anyone. Still, he was confident it had been enough to demonstrate his strength to both Darren and Heathcliff. As the onlookers stood in stunned silence, Quentin wrestled with his own thoughts. He felt an urge to scream, humiliated by his defeat at the hands of a commoner. Yet, as royalty, he resolved to take full responsibility for the situation he had created. His resolve was immediately tested as Grant approached, addressing Heathcliff directly. Grant reminded him that while dueling is sacred to mages, first years are not yet permitted to engage in them. Quentin quickly interjected, demanding that Grant punish him instead, as he was the official witness. Heathcliff, however, calmly pointed out that punishing a royal student so soon after enrollment might be excessive, a comment that visibly surprised Quentin. He then turned to the others, clarifying that the event wasn't a duel at all. He explained that he had simply wanted an audience to witness the new magic he had learned. Grant's sharp gaze shifted to Leon. Addressing him by his surname, Heartfilia, he demanded to know if Heathcliff's words were true. With his eyes downcast, Leon quietly affirmed that they were. This confirmation enraged Heathcliff, who rounded on Leon, demanding to know what he meant. He shouted that he never asked for protection, declaring that to him, the confrontation hadn't even been a real fight. Leon turned away, muttering that there were more important things to consider. He faced them both, his voice low and steady. He stated that he was at the academy for a specific reason. While they were free to look down on commoners as they pleased, he issued a clear warning. If they ever got in his way again, he would not hold back. The intensity in his eyes left no doubt as to the sincerity of his threat. Heathcliff trembled with suppressed fury, but Quentin placed a restraining hand on his shoulder, urging him to let it go. He advised that getting further involved with Leon was a mistake. As Leon turned and walked away down the hall, Quentin quietly bid him farewell. A few days later, during a break, he is approached by his friend Mark, who excitedly announces that the test results have been posted. Mark congratulates him on a job well done, as other students celebrate Heathcliff for placing top of the class. A nearby list shows the rankings. Leon Heartfilia at 11th, followed by Louise Nematoria at 12th and Heathcliff Dewin at 13th. As he turns, he inadvertently bumps into another student. Both offer quick apologies for the collision. Mark throws an arm around his shoulders, telling him to stop worrying. He explains that news of the duel has spread through the entire grade, leaving the two of them completely isolated. Nearby, Quentin and his companion are harassed by other students, who menacingly refer to Quentin's association with the White Devils F.A. Lale and tell them to get lost. He sighs, telling Mark that this is all his fault, but Mark dismisses his concerns. As they eat, a small, rabbit-like creature in a uniform observes that Leon doesn't seem bothered, noting that it's easier now that the arrogant noble students avoid them. Mark is suddenly taken aback, asking Leon in disbelief if he truly doesn't know about F.A. Lale. He questions if Leon is from the countryside, since the name is known throughout the country. Leon, looking perplexed, asks Mark to explain who F.A. Lale is. The story is told of F.A. Lale, the white-haired demon, who, according to legend, first created magic and passed it to humans. But when people began using magic for evil, F.A. Lale consumed the entire village they inhabited. This tale became a common warning for children, both noble and commoner. If you do bad things, F.A. Lale will come and swallow you up. Mark concludes that F.A. Lale was essentially a monster. Seeing Leon's thoughtful expression, he quickly adds that he shouldn't worry, as it's only a myth. He then reconsiders, suggesting that in a way, F.A. Lale was a hero of justice for taking down evil mages. His thought is interrupted as a student walks past them in the hall. Mark recognizes her instantly, Louise Nematoria. He leans in to whisper to Leon, remarking that while she's pretty, she has an unapproachable aura. The rabbit-like creature teases Mark about his taste in girls, which he quickly denies. Leon silently recalls that Louise ranked second in the spellcasting test. He reflects that she is from a lesser noble family and was placed in the 3rd class, surmising that her hard-to-approach reputation is just a general opinion. As she walks away, Louise glances back, her eyes meeting his. He is struck by her intense gaze, a familiar feeling washing over him. He couldn't shake the feeling that Louise had been glaring at him lately. With a flustered expression, he wondered if he was just imagining it, unable to pinpoint a single reason for her attention. As he watched her, Quentin Walls noted that her gaze was different. Unlike the disdainful looks from Heathcliff or Darren, she didn't seem to be looking down on them. Frustrated by his inability to figure it out, Leon shook the thought from his head. His focus snapped to the present as he realized with a jolt of excitement that their next class was about to begin, the very one he'd been anticipating. Their instructor, Grant, stood before the classroom and addressed the new students. Acknowledging that they were now accustomed to academy life, he presented them with a challenge. Their task was to learn the spell of flight. He elaborated on the law, explaining that flight magic is typically restricted nationwide to prevent accidents. However, a special exemption is granted to all students who have reached the age of 15 and enrolled in the Magic Academy. The realization washed over Leon, his expression a mixture of shock and elation. Grant confirmed their new privilege, declaring that all of them were now authorized to fly, and set a deadline. The test would be held that weekend. With a final, good luck, Grant concluded the lesson and departed. Mark, already buzzing with energy, urged Leon to head straight to the courtyard to begin practicing. Leon readily agreed, but a sliver of apprehension tempered his excitement. Something in their teacher's tone suggested the challenge would be far from simple. As Leon and Mark run ahead on the academy grounds, Louise Nematoria watches them, observing that Leon's eyes always sparkle when it's about magic. She concludes he must truly love it. Mark urges his friend to hurry, and Leon, with a confident grin, readily agrees. He stops abruptly, declaring to a nearby Quentin Walls that he can finally use the flight magic he has always admired. Admitting he's tried and failed before, Leon closes his eyes and concentrates, picturing himself floating effortlessly in the air. A swirl of magical energy gathers at his feet, and he lifts off the ground. He shouts in exhilaration to Mark that he's floating, that he did it. Mark stares in amazement, yelling back that it's incredible he managed it in a single attempt. His triumph is short-lived as he loses his balance and tumbles backward. Before he can hit the ground, Mark lunges forward and catches him. He asks if Leon is hurt, but Leon, already recovering with a wink, assures his friend that he's fine. Undeterred, he scrambles up, eager to try again. Mark, however, grabs him, shouting for him to wait and learn from his mistake first. Heeding his own advice, Mark decides to attempt the spell himself, but closer to the ground. He finds it surprisingly easy, lifting into the air with a wobble before steadying himself. He realizes the basic principle of it. He turns to Leon, pointing out a critical distinction. What they are doing isn't true flight, it's merely levitation. Leon shouts back in emphatic agreement. Nearby, Quentin Walls observes that just floating is simple enough. Around them, other students are also stuck at the same stage, some struggling to stay upright. Louise confirms this observation, noting that everyone else seems to be having the same trouble. The group considers this shared obstacle. Leon reasons they must be overlooking something fundamental. Mark speculates whether the key is balance or mental control. As they ponder, Leon has a flash of insight, realizing there is someone they can ask for help. And so, acting on this idea, Leon and Mark stand before a tall, stern-looking figure with crossed arms. Together, they bow their heads and formally request please teach us. He and Mark listened as the upperclassman, Quentin, addressed their plea. With a knowing wink, Quentin explained that while direct advice on flight magic was forbidden, it was still important for juniors to rely on their seniors. He assured them he understood exactly what they needed, leaving the 2 first years stunned into silence. He then stretched, remarking on the perfect weather for flight. However, he quickly dashed their hopes, stating he had a dorm leaders meeting to attend and that they would have to try their best on their own. With a final, encouraging shout for them to keep trying, he launched himself into the air, flying away with an effortless grace that left them behind. As Quentin disappeared, Mark threw his hands up in frustration, complaining that they had gotten nothing from the encounter. Lon, however, disagreed, calmly stating his belief that their senior had, in his own way, given them a hint. He elaborated, asking Mark if he had noticed the difference. Quentin hadn't simply floated. He had taken off from a standstill. Leon described it not as the gentle levitation they had managed, but as a powerful launch, like an arrow being shot into the sky. His eyes lit up with excitement, realizing that Quentin had intentionally demonstrated the technique for them. He urged Mark to hurry so they could try it immediately, and his friend readily agreed as they broke into a run. Finding an open courtyard, he quickly laid out his flight plan. First, he would fly directly toward a nearby tree, then turn left and circle back to their starting point. He shot forward, a burst of speed carrying him through the air. With a triumphant cry, he called out to Mark, exclaiming that he was flying. Mark's triumph turned to panic as he saw his friend hurtling towards the obstacle. He screamed for Leon to look forward, while Leon, realizing his predicament, desperately thought about turning. A moment later, Mark stood alone, a knowing, almost smug look on his face. He brought his hands together in a slow, sarcastic clap, addressing his unseen and likely crashed friend. He yells down at the crumpled form of Leon, demanding to know how someone so smart could end up in such a dangerous position. Groaning from the ground, Leon insists it's not his fault, protesting that he simply cannot change his body's direction. He urges his friend to try it, swearing that one can only fly in a straight line. Dismissing the claim with a scoff, he retorts that turning shouldn't be that difficult. With a determined huff, he launches himself into the air, shouting the incantation for flight. His confidence proves misplaced as he immediately loses his balance, twisting awkwardly before crashing into a tree. Watching the result, Leon concedes that his friend might be right about being able to go straight, but suggests they think it over more, positing that they must be overlooking something beyond simple control and imagination. Later, during the afternoon class, their instructor, Grant, lays out the day's exercise. The students are to get into groups of 4 and compete for control of a floating ball using only magic, with the goal of improving their individual control. Leon lets out a wide yawn, feeling sleepy after using so much magic during the lunch break. He's glad the afternoon class is focused on simple magic control. A female student beside him looks on with admiration, telling him he's amazing. Nearby, another student named Ode McDonagall concentrates fiercely. He declares that while he's giving it his all, he can't seem to get the ball. He recalls placing 5th in a trial run and being confident in his magic control, but admits that surpassing the prince is on another level entirely. The girl, Nina Lane, continues to praise Leon, saying she's amazed. She feels that with her own magic power and control, there's no way she could ever get the ball from him. Leon thanks her, smiling as he says magic is the only thing he's good at. An observation is made about the two of them. Even though Ode and Nina are noble students, they are known for being friendly with commoners and are considered to be among the more moderate nobles. Leon confirms to an unseen classmate that he and Mark have indeed mastered flight. The conversation then turns to Nina, with a classmate noting that she passed the entrance exam even earlier than Mark and Leon did. At that moment, Ode and Nina approach them. Ode announces they were just about to ask the same thing, as Nina shyly asks if it would be all right to practice together with them. Mark reacts with a visible grunt of frustration, magical energy crackling in his hands. Despite his friend's clear annoyance, the practice session begins after school. Ode takes the lead, asking how far Leon and Nina have progressed with flight magic. Nina explains they can float and fly straight, but cannot move freely once airborne. Mark confirms that he and Leon are stuck at the exact same point, prompting Ode to surmise that their shared problem is more complex than a simple matter of control. After spending a considerable amount of time practicing without success, the group agrees they are missing something and decide to try again tomorrow. Later that evening in their room, Mark suddenly exclaims that it's no good. He's too hungry to focus. Leon, looking up from his desk, reminds him that he had 4 helpings at dinner, adding that using one's brain consumes a lot of energy. He triumphantly declares that this is precisely why he stashed some food from the school store. Rummaging through his drawer, he pulls out a snack, proclaiming that even this is enough to fill the gap. Leon watches from his bed, incredulous, asking how he can even fit all that food inside him. With a wide grin, Mark states the obvious. When he's hungry, he eats again. He then notices that it's already time for lights out. Wishing Mark a good night, he turns off the lights, plunging the room into darkness. As he lies in bed, his mind drifts back to the very first dream he ever had. He remembers a writhing mass of black magic that coalesced and took the form of a cat. As a child, he gave his creature a name, Mozo. This creature was a companion he could only meet within his dreams. He held the small, magical being close, cherishing it as his precious friend. A realization dawns on him. The reason he can use magic so well now is because of all the practice he did with Mozo. As the cat-like creature playfully paws at his face, he wonders aloud why it is so lively today. His question is answered in a startling fashion as Mozo suddenly multiplies, filling the space around him with identical, caped black cats. Leon stares, bewildered, as the original Mozo sits on a stack of books, looking back at him with a curious tilt of its head. He had a sudden realization. A memory of Mark's simple logic, that when hungry, one simply eats again, flashed through his mind. Looking at the small, magical creature, Leon understood. He praised them both as geniuses and thanked Mozo, a new plan solidified. The next morning, the group of 4 students gathered outside. Ode initiated the conversation, asking how everyone's night of contemplation had gone. The responses were disheartening. Nina apologized, admitting she couldn't come up with any useful ideas. Ode confessed that despite staying up late, nothing had come to him. Mark, leaning back with a yawn, grumbled that he hadn't found a single clue either. As they lamented their lack of progress, Leon stepped forward with a confident grin. He announced that he had, in fact, thought of something new and urged them all to watch. He began his demonstration by casting a levitation spell. Then, with a second incantation for ascent, he began to rise steadily into the air, leaving his classmates watching from below in astonishment. Once airborne, he shot forward with a grin, soaring through the air as his friends stared up from the ground. He slowed to a stop, hovering effortlessly in place while Mark watched from below, his mouth agape. Touching down gently, he was met with a chorus of amazement. Mark yelled that it was incredible, while Nina could only repeat that he was actually flying. He winked, explaining his simple principle. When you get hungry, you just eat again. Ode praised his ingenuity, admitting he'd failed no matter how many times he tried. Nina, still bewildered, asked how he was even managing it. Their confusion suddenly gave way to understanding. Mark pointed, exclaiming that he finally got it. The simple, yet brilliant, logic behind Leon's success had dawned on them all. He points, a look of sudden comprehension on his face. He explains that it looks like he's finally figured out what Leon meant by layering magic. This meant that while they had all been assuming flight was a single, complex spell, it was actually composed of multiple spells working together in sequence. A spell to take off, another to turn, others to arc through the air, and finally, one to land. With this new understanding, the other students eagerly declare their intent to try chaining spells together. Mark proclaims that once the mechanism is understood, the test is simple. That very day, he, Leon, Quentin, and Ode all master flight. Their instructor, Grant, then gathers the class, announcing that from that moment until the weekend, the flight test would officially begin. As the test proceeded, it became clear that the other students were also exceptionally skilled. Darren Roas and Heathcliff Doohan both soared through the air, passing with ease. Their success was followed by the rest of the students, until Grant clapped his hands together, beaming. He announced that it had been a while since an entire class had passed, congratulating all 20 students of Class 1 on their excellent performance. With the test successfully concluded, Mark and Leon share a celebratory fist bump. Grant calls for them to return to the classroom, declaring that a new challenge awaits them all. Back in the classroom, Grant distributes handouts for their next assignment. Leon takes one of the papers as it floats down to his desk, his eyes scanning the text. He then addresses the class from his lectern, explaining that they must have realized from the flight assignment that to truly master magic, they need the skill to refine each spell's precision and apply it with flexibility. He continues, emphasizing that true ability is being able to demonstrate that refined skill in any given situation. Mark listens intently from his seat. To that end, Ode MacDonagall read from the handout, realizing that the upcoming external field training is, in short, a way to measure their true ability. Mark shouts in shock, understanding now that it is an unannounced test. Grant's voice booms across the training ground, his smile wide and intense. He warns the students to never let their guard down, urging them to diligently tackle their daily assignments and lessons. With a final, emphatic command, he tells them to prepare themselves for the coming training. The announcement sends a jolt through the class. Leon's face flushes, his eyes wide with a mixture of panic and exhilaration, while Heath remains perfectly composed, offering a subtle, confident wink. A notice posted at the academy announces the first real magic field training, sparking excitement among the first-year students, including Mark and Leon. The document lists potential activities, from simple herb gathering to the more dangerous task of magical bee subjugation. The possibilities overwhelm Nina, who worries aloud about what she should do. She confesses her weakness in offensive magic and her fear of getting hurt, but Leon quickly reassures her that everything will be fine. As she frets that the training will likely just be herb gathering, Quentin Walls, an upperclassman, suddenly appears. He throws his arms around Mark and Leon with a wide grin, cheerfully greeting his juniors. He brings up the fact that students are allowed to bring their own tools for the training. Seizing the opportunity, he tells them he wants to go into town on their upcoming day off to find useful items. He enthusiastically offers to show them a great nearby shop that he frequents, boasting about the amazing things they sell. He explains that unlike the third years, whose schedules are unpredictable, first years get their days off scheduled in advance. With that, the group heads into town. Noticing Nina's lingering apprehension, Quentin offers more words of comfort. He assures her that the field training is conducted under strict security, and if any real danger arises, the teachers will be the first to deal with it. With a flourish, he gestures towards a grand, ornate building with impressive double doors, proudly announcing that they have arrived at his recommended shop. His declaration, however, is lost on Leon, whose attention has been captured by a different, sparkling storefront. As Leon peeks around a corner, mesmerized, Quentin calls out to him, pointing in the opposite direction and reminding him that the shop is over here. He then leads them not to the grand building, but down a dark, cobweb-strewn alley to a dilapidated doorway. Here it is, he proclaims. The others stare in horror. Mark asks if this is really it, voicing a desperate hope that it's like their dorm, shabby on the outside but amazing on the inside. Their hopes are dashed as they look inside. The shop is just as run down and chaotic within. While his friends stand frozen in disbelief, Quentin strides in confidently, announcing that he's going to greet the shopkeeper. He nonchalantly invited his friends to browse the merchandise. Their faces fell in unison. Leon covered his mouth in disbelief. Nina clasped her hands in dismay, and Mark shielded his eyes as if from a terrible sight. Their dismay grew as they looked closer. Quentin pointed out that even the staffs were cracked and unusable. Leon noted the books were caked in dust, while Mark saw that the potion bottles were all fractured. Mark complained loudly that there wasn't a single decent item in the entire shop. Leon, however, grew thoughtful. He found the situation strange, reasoning that a place recommended by Quentin had to have something more to it. As his fingers brushed against a cracked bottle, a realization struck him. He thought he understood, but a sharp voice suddenly roared, "You fool!" and his hand was violently slapped away from the shelf. An imposing woman with a broom, identifying herself as Rita, the shopkeeper of Demon Hall, loomed over him. She furiously warned that casting nullification on a magic potion would turn it to water, and he'd be paying for the damages for the rest of his life. As Mark rushed to his side, a stunned Leon could only apologize. Quentin stepped in, calmly addressing her as Granny Rita and asking her to go easy on Leon since he had at least noticed the magic. With a scoff, Rita retorted that he still had a long way to go as she waved her hand, dispelling the illusion. The dilapidated facade dissolved, revealing a pristine and well-stocked magic shop. Nina gasped in amazement, realizing it had all been an illusion, a projection spell that only altered appearances. Mark cheerfully noted that while the shop was old, it was actually very clean. Leon, rubbing his sore hand, correctly guessed this was all part of Quentin's scheme. Quentin simply smiled, confirming he was right, though he objected to the sinister-sounding term. Now seeing the true inventory, the group pointed excitedly at the amazing items. Quentin explained that this was a rehearsal, as deceptive situations often occur during field training. He then informed them they had barely passed his test, gesturing towards rare potion ingredients and artifacts crafted by famous mages, items too precious to even touch. Leon, truly impressed, picked up a small bottle and asked Rita for the price. When she quoted 200 gil, Quentin immediately protested, calling it highway robbery and demanding she sell it for 150. Rita shot back, telling the brat not to get smart with her, refusing to knock off a single coin. He was considering the price of an item when Quentin asked if he planned to buy something. But his attention was suddenly captured by a familiar face, a young woman with reddish hair who seemed to recognize him as well. Her recognition was not a friendly one. With a furious expression, she jabbed a finger at him, shouting for him not to use her name, Louise Nematoria, so casually before calling him a coward. He, however, simply smiled. His smile vanished, replaced by a sharp glare. He leaned forward, demanding to know what she was talking about, insisting he had done nothing to earn such an insult. Before the confrontation could escalate, another young woman intervened, gently chiding Louise for fighting. Unfazed, Louise declared that she knew what he had done, her eyes narrowing with conviction. The peacemaker turned to Rita with a bright smile, introducing herself as Lodi Haler, a second year from the Ains Magic Academy. Her eyes then landed on Leon, and she exclaimed in recognition, identifying him as the famous Leon Hartfilia. He wryly told Louise not to bother with pleasantries, acknowledging his reputation as the cheater everyone was talking about. Louise then revealed the source of her anger, recounting a rumor she'd heard in her dorm. She explained that someone told her Leon's magic had failed during the practice test, yet he still managed to score higher than the prince, which she found strange. The story, she continued, was being spread by Ayrton, a student from Leon's own homeland. He was apparently telling everyone that Leon was worthless and had even tried to attack him in their dormitory. The rumor had spiraled into a damning accusation that Leon Hartfilia had cheated to secure first place in the practice exam and was now violently silencing anyone who dared to question it. Having listened to the entire account, Lodi Haler rested her chin on her hand with a knowing smile. She gently asked Louise why she didn't consider hearing Leon's version of events. Beside her, Quentin murmured that he now understood the situation. Louise sputtered that she found it hard to believe. Lodi calmly countered, questioning if Louise wasn't misunderstanding him. She pointed out that the red-haired student spreading the rumor had only heard the story secondhand himself, planting a seed of doubt in Louise's mind. To settle the matter, Mark proposes a simple solution. They should all go outside so Leon can demonstrate his abilities and clear everything up. Accepting the challenge, Leon steps forward and begins to cast. He conjures a small, dense orb of mana, which then multiplies. Louise watches, stunned, as the orbs combine and their power rapidly intensifies. The spell erupts into a monstrous, bird-like beast made of pure, swirling mana. Louise gasps in utter shock, reeling from the display. She cannot comprehend such monstrous power or the fact that his control over magic is on a completely different level from her own. As the mana construct dissipates, he turns back to them, asking if that was too much, admitting he held back considerably. Mark declares him amazing, but Louise is speechless, horrified by the realization that what she witnessed wasn't even his full power. Leon smiles, glad the misunderstanding is resolved, and apologizes for getting heated. Overwhelmed by the undeniable proof, Louise bows her head in shame, sincerely apologizing and admitting she was wrong. She slumps against the counter, feeling utterly hopeless. She laments that her mother always warned her about her tendency to jump to conclusions. As she reflects, Mark admits he didn't realize relations between nobles and commoners were so poor, and Leon adds that they actually want to get along. Louise realizes now that not all nobles are alike. Thinking of Quentin haggling relentlessly for a discount, she asks Leon to just call her Louise, prompting him to ask why a noble student is working a part-time job. With a small smile, Louise explains that her family is poor and has no money, so much so that they are mocked as the poorest nobles in the northern region. She continues, recounting how she swore to become a mage to help her parents and her people after discovering her talent. She practiced hard and was confident, but upon enrolling at the academy, she was placed in the lowest class. Hearing that the second prince was in her year made everything seem dark. Determined, she pushed herself, hoping to at least take first place in the practice exams. She recalls looking at the rankings and seeing that while she had managed to outrank the second prince, she was still second place, just behind Leon Hartfilia. She finished her explanation, her arms crossed as she confirmed that the one who came in first was, in fact, Leon Hartfilia. With a hand over her face, she apologized, admitting her misguided sense of justice had run wild. She expressed genuine relief that his abilities were properly recognized. But then, her demeanor shifted to one of fierce determination. Pointing directly at him, she declared with a teary-eyed wink that next time, she would absolutely not lose. She then clapped her hands together, decisively stating that with the misunderstanding cleared up, they could consider the case closed. Turning to a startled Leon, she asked what it was he had wanted from her in the first place. He stammered in response, remembering his original purpose. Louise's face lit up with enthusiasm as she presented 2 bottles of ink, explaining that even inks of the same color can have slightly different effects. Overwhelmed by her help, Leon thanked her profusely. Her proximity caused him to blush. She noticed his hesitation and asked if something was wrong. Internally, he was struck by how beautiful she was up close, a realization that startled him. He quickly composed himself and said he would take one of the inks. Suddenly, his friend Mark grabbed him from behind, shouting his name. Mark loudly accused him of being completely smitten with Louise, warning him that she was totally out of his league. A flustered Leon, his face bright red, could only yell for him to shut up. He was then unceremoniously dragged away by Mark, who declared it was time to head back. As Quentin Walls and Heathcliff Dewin followed, Quentin suggested they visit again. Mark, still manhandling a struggling Leon, cut in, telling the two of them that was enough romance talk for one day. Later that night, in their shared room, Mark practiced with a large scroll while Leon sat at his desk, lost in thought, a quill in his hand. He recalled the events of the day, remembering that as an apology, Louise had lent him a book. It was a detailed text on the subject of marks, which he was sure would be helpful. From what he could gather, creating a mark required the precise writing of a spell. As he practiced, Mark commented from his side of the room that it looked like he was finally getting the hang of it. With a sigh of relief, Leon focused, carefully inscribing the characters for a levitation spell onto a piece of paper. He seems to have gotten the hang of creating the magical inscriptions, holding up a successful paper mark. Seeing this, Mark eagerly presents his sword, suggesting Leon place a control mark on it. He argues that he's far more comfortable with a sword than a staff. The logic behind Mark's request was sound. Leon recalled the principles from the book. Magic improves when paired with a suitable tool. Much like scissors cut paper more cleanly than bare hands. While most mages use common wooden staffs for their affordability, others achieved better results with items they were personally familiar with, such as swords or books. The control mark was the key to making such unconventional implements viable. With a steady hand, he carefully inscribed the mark onto the flat of the blade, announcing its completion. He then held it up, examining his handiwork with a critical eye. Mark snatched the sword, his eyes sparkling with excitement. He declared it looked amazing and was overcome with the urge to test it out right away. Leon quickly intervened, shouting a warning that it was far too dangerous to swing it around in their room. His excitement now tempered with caution, Mark sat down, suddenly nervous. He decided he would sleep fully dressed, with his sword and boots on, recalling Quentin's advice to be careful. Leon agreed with the sentiment, resolving to keep his own robe nearby. As midnight arrived, the two friends wished each other a good night. The academy grounds fell silent under the moon. While Leon slept soundly, a strange energy began to coalesce around him. Without warning, he was lifted from his bed and pulled into a swirling portal of light that vanished as quickly as it appeared. He found himself sitting in a sun-drenched forest clearing, the abrupt change in scenery leaving him bewildered. Whoa, he murmured, trying to comprehend his new surroundings. Wait, is this? His confusion melted away, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated excitement. It really started, he cried out. Leon's very first magic field training had begun. The question now was whether he could make it through safely. Leon finds himself in a dense, unfamiliar forest, a place he recognizes as a magically created dimension. He marvels at the power required to construct such a space, but quickly shakes off his awe, focusing on the task at hand and wondering what he is supposed to do. As he stands perplexed, a cheerful voice greets him. A young woman with long, wavy hair appears suddenly beside him, startling him. She introduces herself as a second-year student who will be guiding him through the magical field training. He is relieved to see a familiar face, recognizing her as Lodi-senpai. She confirms that since this is his first training, the task is simple. He must submit 1 white-silver butterfly wing and 1 Hymeria root. She continues her explanation, revealing that her sudden appearance was due to using stealth magic. Lodi reassures him that teachers in second years will be monitoring the training using the same magic, ready to intervene if necessary. The time limit is 24 hours, and she informs him that he can ask for the remaining time at any point. With a wink, Lodi admits she isn't really supposed to say it, but she personally has high expectations for him and encourages him to do his best. With those parting words, she vanishes, leaving Leon alone in the woods to begin his task. Left alone, he begins to strategize. He recalls that white-silver butterflies inhabit wetlands, while Hymeria plants grow in cold, dry regions. He reasons that in a magically created space, it wouldn't be strange for such disparate environments to exist in close proximity. Having formulated a plan, he decides to search for the swamp first. To conserve stamina while traversing the terrain, he resolves to use defense magic to create solid footholds, a technique that consumes mana but saves physical energy. His magical path carries him forward, and after walking for some time, he spots his objective. With a shout of success, he identifies a swamp ahead, with the telltale white-silver butterflies fluttering above the water. He approaches the water's edge, but finds he doesn't have the heart to catch and kill a living butterfly. Instead, he spots a fallen wing on the ground and carefully picks it up, grabbing a few extras just in case. With the wing secured, he marvels at how quickly he found it, wondering if he was simply teleported to a favorable spot. He checks the time and learns that 21 hours remain. He sat down to rest, feeling the weight of the late hour. With plenty of time to spare in his training, he decided a short nap was in order and quickly drifted off. His rest was abruptly shattered by a sharp voice. Darren Roas stood over him, shaking him awake and demanding to know what he was playing at. He warned Leon that he wouldn't be so lenient next time and told him to look at his own clothes. Startled, Leon looked down to find his robes drenched in murky swamp water. He realized with a jolt that the water level was rising periodically, putting him in danger. He turned to Darren, expressing his gratitude for being woken up just in time. Darren turned away, flustered, insisting that thanks weren't necessary. He impatiently urged Leon to hurry up and dry his clothes so they could leave the dangerous area. Having found a safer perch on a high branch, Leon explained his sleepiness was due to the late hour and asked if Darren felt the same. Darren, however, corrected him, stating that his drowsiness was caused by something else entirely. He pointed towards the water's edge, revealing a small creature he identified as a sleep dragon. Darren explained that Leon had likely inhaled the hypnotic powder the dragon released from its back, which Leon hadn't noticed at all. The full extent of the danger dawned on Leon, and he thanked Darren again, acknowledging that he would have drowned and failed the training. Darren reacted with loud, flustered protests, claiming he only intervened to protect his own reputation, not to help Leon. To dry their clothes, Leon conjured a sphere of warm air with a spell. As a magical wind blew, Darren turned away, covering his face with his hand. Confused by his behavior, Leon asked what was wrong. Darren then began to explain his change of heart, admitting that since their duel, he had come to a realization. His noble habit of looking down on commoners meant nothing, a truth made clear by his defeat. He concluded that he needed to apologize for his past actions. He continued his explanation, bringing up Heath. Darren confessed that he had once been more mild-mannered, but had become insecure due to having such an exceptional older brother in the Crown Prince. He added that, unlike himself, Heath had never been the type to look down on commoners. He sat with his head in his hands, lost in thought. As Darren's childhood friend, he'd watched him up close and could always tell when something was off. But now, something was different. He couldn't understand Darren's desperation. A wall had formed between them, and though he wanted to listen, he hadn't been able to bridge the gap. His introspection was cut short when Darren apologized for putting him in an awkward spot. Seeing that their clothes were dry, he suggested they get going. As they stepped past a distinct line on the ground, the air grew suddenly cold, causing Leon to shiver and wrap his robe tighter. Darren pointed towards a towering, rocky peak, stating that Hymeria heartfilia grows on such terrain and that they should try climbing up. They ascended to a narrow ledge high on the cliff face. Darren scanned the area, noting that while it seemed like the right kind of place, he couldn't see any of the flowers. Undeterred, Leon announced he would check further below. Before Darren could protest, he invoked a flight spell and leaped from the edge. Darren yelled after him in alarm, warning him not to be reckless. He landed back on the ledge a moment later, reporting that he had searched all the way down but found not a single bloom. He began to wonder if his knowledge about the flower was wrong. As he pondered this, Darren called out his name with concern. Suddenly, a familiar voice called out to him. It was Nina Lane, looking slightly out of breath. She asked if he had seen any Hymeria, explaining that it's a red flower that should be easy to spot, yet her group had been unable to find it. She joined them on the path, and Leon confirmed that they hadn't found any either, despite searching all around. Darren added that it was unnatural for such ideal cliffs to be completely barren of the flower. Nina agreed, stating that her group hadn't found any promising locations elsewhere. With his arms crossed, Darren mused that the Academy was known for pulling tricks like this. At his words, Nina realized the implication, and a look of understanding dawned on Leon's face. They decided to head away from the cliffs immediately. As the three of them emerged from a narrow pass, they were met by a cheerful shout. Mark waved enthusiastically, with Lodi and Heath beside him, exclaiming that he knew they would run into them. Leon smiled, happy to see his friends, but Mark's expression quickly soured into shock as he noticed Darren standing with him. Mark immediately questioned why Leon was with someone like Darren. Leon explained that, to make a long story short, Darren had helped him. Mark reluctantly accepted this, saying it was fine if Leon was okay with it. Lodi then spoke up cheerfully, pointing out that since they had all reached the boundary line, they were likely all thinking the same thing. United, the group celebrated their success. Mark cheered loudly as they all held up the true objective of their search. Not a flower, but a small, leafy plant. Leon smiled, a glowing butterfly resting gently on his finger. He holds the silver butterfly, explaining his realization that the exam was likely designed for the required materials to become unobtainable as time passed. In the wetlands where they were sent, the swamp overflowed, submerging the flowers the butterflies gathered on. Lodi Haler confirms his theory, stating it was similar for her group. By the time they finished collecting the Hymeria roots, the flowers that were still blooming had withered and fallen to the bottom of a cliff. She concludes that the core point of the practical exercise must have been to force students who only had one of the two materials to negotiate and trade with others. Lodi expresses her relief that they were all able to meet up quickly, acknowledging that negotiations with unknown students could have been time-consuming, especially since everyone likely carried extra materials as insurance. Leon agrees completely. Meanwhile, Quentin Walls cautiously approaches Heath, suggesting that even if they continue to search the forest, they wouldn't find any more silver butterflies. Heath, his face shadowed with despair, erupts, shouting at Quentin to shut up, yelling that he already knows. His frustration boils over as he slams his fist against a nearby tree, crying out in anger while Quentin watches, taken aback. He clenches his trembling fist, vowing that this time he has to come out on top. He cannot afford to lose to commoners or impoverished nobles ever again. His mind flashes back to his childhood, a time when he was constantly compared to his outstanding older brother. He had always believed that the first prince, popular and well-respected, would naturally inherit the throne. But at 15, a turning point arrived. He recalls his unique talent for magic, a gift neither his father nor his brother possessed. He was the only royal who could wield it. He believed that even as the second prince, if he graduated at the top of the magic academy, the public's attention would finally turn to him. But to him, the recent defeat wasn't even a real battle. In his mind, he is shackled and chained, a collar tightened around his neck by a shadowy figure of Leon, symbolizing his complete and utter subjugation. He reflects on his inner turmoil. His magical talent and royal pride, once sources of strength, had become chains that bind him. The more he rejected his own weakness and let his arrogant pride swell, the tighter those chains wrapped around him, robbing him of his freedom. The duel with Leon Hartfilia only tightened them further. Pulled from his dark thoughts, he finds himself lost in the woods with his companions. Mark, looking ahead, points urgently, asking what he sees. Quentin urges Lord Heathcliff to look, noting they've gone past the forest. They see two female students in the distance. Heath's eyes narrow as he questions if they're exchanging materials, immediately decrying it as cheating. Quentin tries to calm him, suggesting it's a proper approach, while Mark whispers for him to be quiet, fearing he'll upset Heath even more. He dismisses their caution, his anger rising. He orders Mark to go and crush their materials to pieces. When Mark hesitates, Quentin volunteers to go instead. Heath, disgusted, calls them both useless and tells them to get out of his sight. Meanwhile, Leon approaches the two girls with a friendly smile, asking what they're doing in a place like this. The bob-haired student recognizes him as Lichon, while Lodi identifies him as the prince everyone was talking about at the entrance ceremony. They explain that they were simply exchanging materials. Lodi adds that since they both have more than 2 items, they will be happy to trade with the prince if he is missing anything. She holds out a delicate, butterfly-shaped material as an offering. Before Leon can respond, a hand slaps it away. Lodi looks up in shock, asking what despicable people would do such a thing. The prince stands before them, his expression contorted with fury. He declares that people like them do not belong in this academy. The sheer malice radiating from him causes both Lodi and her friend to recoil in fear.